Hello, I'm Earl Weinberg, and this is Book Circle Presents The Cavalry Cycle. This time we'll continue with our reading of Cold Yule, Buckjack. John sat squeezed between the wall and the dining table, which had been shoved against the opposite wall. This was just as it had been when Jeff came home after his transformation. As horses, they were only of Mustang or Arabian caliber, but still out of dining room scale. When Jeff arrived, should they volunteer to get out of the way and sit in the living room before they were asked? Or maybe one in the living room taking turns? Uncle Jeff! Something small and active scrambled onto his back and bounced down hard where back met waist. He got hugged. No, Val, it's Uncle Jack. That was his sister, Chloe. There was a breathless note in her voice. She was seeing him thus for the first time, as were Valerian and Lucy, his nephew and niece, and Axel, Chloe's husband. He turned to smile at her. She smiled back. Mischievously? He continued the turn until he was facing, as well as he could, his rider and nephew, Val. Uncle Jack, you grew a beard. John thought this a bit of an understatement, but Val, who was 5, seemed more surprised by this than by the horseback he sat astride. I grew more than that, he answered Val, nodding along his own length. Val nodded. Mummy told us. Now Lucy, who was 6 but quieter, a low bar, clambered onto him behind her brother. Maybe seating would not be a major issue if he and Jeff were willing to act as couches. Hi, Lucy. You're beautiful, Uncle Jack, she told him, stroking the stretch of fawn flank between her and Val. It twitched involuntarily under her light touch, and he felt himself blushing around a silly grin. There was a flash. Chloe had taken their picture. So we have 2 now, right? Lucy asked. Uncle Jeff didn't change back? That's right. No conservation of horses here. Val looked to Dominic Weldon at the end of the table. Are you going to change Pepe? He seemed to think this might be a good idea. John's father's eyes popped. No plans to. You, Daddy? Val asked Axel, who had been gazing silently at John with a slightly quizzical smile. No, thank you, Axel replied. How are you doing, John? He reached over to shake hands. John said he was fine. Axel continued the quizzical stare. I want to ask you what it's like, but I don't suppose you can tell me. That's right. I can't even properly remember what my old shape felt like. His mother made a tiny distressed noise, and he wished he hadn't spoken. Can I change? Val asked. No, John's mother nearly yelped. You have to be grown up, Chloe told him smoothly, like with driving a car. That would be an interesting combination to see, Axel murmured. He took the seat by John's tail. How did you get here? Customized horse trailer, John answered. They dropped me off on the highway on the other side of the woods. I was the first. They've got 3 other guys they're dropping off. Busy night. But aren't there 6 in your class? Yes, but the other 2 are staying in Upham. Feeling a little like steward and airliner combined, he passed the sandwich plate down his back to his passengers, snagging one for himself first. Is that enough? His mother asked. That can't be enough. Nor was it. I'll get myself some oatmeal later, John said. I thought you ate grass stew, said Lucy. Hay stew in winter. We call it mulch, and not on vacation, I don't. And you eat sandwiches, Val noted. It's like that Narnia story. Each stomach wants breakfast. Or tea. Right, but I can't chew like a horse, so we stew the grass, or eat oatmeal. How do you pass it around inside you? It takes care of itself. Niece and nephew both stared down at his sides, clearly thinking about plumbing. Val leaned over on the left and pressed his hand against the flank. Is that the horse heart? He asked, feeling the beat. Yes, I have 2 now. Does it love us too? This was asked with the same factual curiosity as the question about stomachs. Axel and Chloe chuckled. John heard nothing from his parents' side of the table. His eyes were on the kids, head and torso twisted back, and he did not glance over. Instead, he smiled, which required only a little force, and slowly rolled on his side, keeping his human torso upright and taking care to keep his legs from getting tangled in the legs of the dining table. With one arm, he gently pushed the children down the side of his horse belly into the space between front and rear legs, and he curled around them like a cat around her kittens. They giggled and looked up at him. It was now possible, barely, for him to lean down and around to hug them with one arm. Awkward, but possible, and worth it. I always love you with all the hearts I've got. They giggled again and hugged back. I'll start the oatmeal, his mother declared, rising and leaving quickly. I can do that, Mum, he called into the kitchen. That's all right, she called back, and he realized she was escaping. You did not get your taste for the strange from your mother, his father said quietly. A double-natured cuddling and talk of two hearts. Too weird. This passed over the heads of the children, almost literally, since they had launched from their new position to crawl under the dining table. Get out of there, Axel roared with mock ferocity, getting down on hands and knees and pushing in himself. John carefully pulled his legs back under him and resumed his upright crouch. Well, said Chloe briskly, the strange becomes familiar with time. Mr. Weldon glanced down at the dining table. Squeals, giggles, and daddy roars issued forth, making good acoustic cover. She feels like she's running out of sons. Sometimes I feel that way too. John alarmed himself by rearing a bit, though seated. I'm still your son, he protested. He had not meant to snap, not exactly, but he had. So is Jeff, he added more quietly, but the hubbub under the table had stilled. How much had Who heard? He watched anger flare over his father's face, then ebb as he bottled it up the way he usually did. Usually. If not, you were in trouble. So he wasn't, but he still muttered, sorry. It's just what it feels like, his father said. But we go on from here. It sounded more grim, less positive than it had in the garage. There was a mutter under the table, and a squeal and a giggle. Axel was successfully distracting. He'd probably be good at explaining, too, when distraction wore off. Chloe rose. Tea was what I needed. Now it's back to shopping. John, are you willing to play Beast of Burden and come with me? John rose, too. No playing about it, part of the job description. I need to shop, too. Love you, called Chloe from the door, cheerful, airy. It was a farewell the family often used. John started to worm his way through the human scale furniture after her. He looked back at his father, whose expression was midway between sadness and the trader's assessing gaze. Reckoning up losses? Love you, he said, more soberly. His father nodded, still looking sad. With both hearts. Love you too. The early winter night had fallen. Chloe looked John over by streetlight. I know you're a big furry beast now that holds the heat and all, but don't you want your jacket? She had donned hat and coat as she left, but he was still in his t-shirt. He nodded and wheeled, heading for the side door to the garage. She trailed after. Is it okay, she asked, to joke around that way and call you Big Furry Beast and Beast of Burden? Jeff just jokes back. It's okay. I just don't feel jokey at the moment. We talk that way all the time at the base. I am a beast and a man and your younger brother. So, you seem to have it all together, big sister. Should I not have come? No, then we really would be losing you. And so would I and Axel and the Sprats. You're in the military, the expeditionary forces. We're going to see little enough of you. John plucked his jacket off the mat, shrugged into it, put on his Stetson. Love the hat, Chloe said. I'd like to get everyone cowboy hats for Christmas, but I think Mum might pitch a fit. John smiled wanly, picked harness up, and began stepping into it and buckling it. What are you doing? Chloe asked. Beast of Burden. This is how we do it. Let me help with that. She reached toward a distant buckle. We're supposed to be able to do it all ourselves. And you can, I'm sure, and that'll be great when you're in some howling wilderness in the out zones, but we're just going shopping, so let me. He let her. They stepped out into the street, and she squared her shoulders. He realized he had too. Forward, she proclaimed. Oakwood Street curved around the edge of Stirk from the actual oak wood down to the shore and some of the docks, sprouting little courts and side streets along the way. Between the residential section where they now stood and the docks lay a stretch of stores and restaurants, all part of the secret Grand Norman enclave. John and Chloe walked toward it and toward the scores of neighbors John had last seen from aboard Two Legs. "Is there talk about me on the street?" he asked. "Any different from the talk about Jeff?" Chloe and Axel lived in Durham, not Stirk, but she had certainly been on Oakwood Street more than John had in the past half-year. A lot of it the same talk stirred up again. John remembered it. He and Peter had heard some of it said directly to their faces, the rest repeated to them by friends with or without sources being cited. On the good side, there was very patriotic. What a sacrifice. It's like a knighthood, isn't it? A lot of them are knights. Good pay. It's like becoming a superhero. On the bad side, there was, it's unnatural. Couldn't pay me enough. Must have had some terrible disease. Why would anyone do that if they didn't have to? Followed by speculation about why one might have to. He must have had a terrible falling out with his family and they never want to see him again, or he never wants to see them again. It's a kind of exile, and the favorite blackmailed into it. Someone wants to make sure he fathers no children in their family. I mean, they can't, can they? Not children. And the stereotypes and misapprehensions. They're monks, aren't they? Their own order? I mean, they have vows. They're kind of fey, I heard. They all become mages. Terrible tempers, especially drunk. Randy as hell, don't let him near the girls. And the jokes. Good thing no one on the street keeps horses. Is Dom Weldon going to go into horse trading, do you think? Wants a family expert? Or breeding stock? The jokes and negative comments got back to John and the rest of the family through friends, anxious to report how they had stood up for Jeff and the Weldons, or to report the enormities of common enemies, or to observe entertaining anger from a safe moral position. John, living at home at the time, participated in several heated arguments on his brother's behalf. Peter got into an inconclusive fistfight with another boy, and Dominic Weldon challenged Raymond Beeman to a duel in the street in front of the Driftwood pub. Beeman had proposed that Dominic had, in effect, thrown Jeff away for being lazy. Arrangements, made at shouting volume, specified bare fists to first fall. Right here, right now, bucko. When Beeman reckoned up relative adrenaline levels, realized, so to speak, that John was not joking, and backed off with apologies about misunderstanding. No one had circulated the idea again. Such a challenge was technically illegal, but Dame Sarah would never have deigned to notice one so minor, and John thought one so excusable. Then, last Christmas, Jeff came home on hooves, a fantastic figure even to people living next to a fey would. Not a fey himself, not a mage, not raging, clearly not exiled, but not just the old Jeff Weldon on four legs either. Old Jeff had been witty, affable, and laid back. New Jeff was witty and cheery, but had sharp comebacks and was busy. He had made himself very visible, putting up outside decorations, first at the Weldons' house, then at their neighbors', rearing up to upper windows when necessary, and sometimes acting as mobile and intelligent stepladder. He organized snowman buildings, snowball fights, and rides for the kids, starting with Peter, often while wearing a life-size pair of toy antlers. He took part in the street caroling despite not being asked to join. But then no one asked the 1,000-pound bass at the rear with 3 singing siblings on his back to leave. John had seen it all up close, helping with the decorating as well as the singing, joining in the family conferences on waging the charm campaign. After New Year's, when Jeff had gone back to Saint-Éloi in Normandy, the family reckoned the campaign a success. The good comments were louder, the bad ones fewer. And Chloe pointed out to John that the campaign had worked on them too. The whole family felt better about Jeff's transformation now. John remembered thinking about Jeff, still missing him but regarding his new life with benign interest. Then Donna dumped him. As for new talk, Chloe said, I think you heard it all after you left. John nodded. He and his family had kept his decision to enlist private until after the fact. All the yelling had happened inside the house. Afterward, the news had to come out. Some people had thought Dominic Weldon was spending sons recklessly to look posh or to gain some business advantage with the military. And what does Valerie think, I'd like to know? Many more wondered what was up with the Weldon boys, transforming one after another. Some began asking Peter whether or when he was going to enlist and change. And most had immediately blamed John's action on Donna's rejection. What did Mom and Dad say? They defended you just as they did Jeff. They said it's his choice, it worked well for Jeff, so he's following his example, he's doing well, he feels great. John could not see Chloe's face, but her voice started picking up strain. But they wonder if there's something wrong with the Weldon boys, and if they're doing something wrong, and they worry about Peter because they don't want him to change. They don't want to lose him, too, John muttered. Yes, well, you could mitigate that feeling with more phone calls and email. She had gone from strained to sharp. You're right, he admitted, surrendering quickly. I'm just being cowardly. New Year's resolution, more contact. Stick to it. A figure, short and solid, came rolling their way in the approved sailory gait. Even before it passed under a street lamp, they knew it for Captain Lovell. He had served in the Grand Norman Navy, then on merchant ships, and then, in retirement, bought his own little boat to fish from and run errands with, and so earned the title Captain, which his neighbors were careful to use. He had been doing his own holiday shopping, as shown by the bags he carried. Chloe, Jeff, welcome back. Happy Christmas, sir, Jack replied. Happy Christmas, sir, Chloe echoed, only this is Jack. John admired the way she popped that strain into some metaphorical box out of the way at Lovell's greeting. Jack, of course, well. He shifted all the bags to his left arm and offered John an unhesitating handshake. That done, and as if it were the next natural move, he clapped John on the withers. His gaze registered nothing but pleasant interest. Captain Lovell might not be any Odysseus, but he had seen enough to be hard to startle. Don't you look grand? Feeling fit? Never better, sir. Two of you now. Is Jeff coming too? Tomorrow, sir. And then Peter comes tomorrow afternoon. Peter? I had no idea they took them so young. Oh, no, sir. Peter's just coming home from school. They don't take them younger than 16. Ah, well, a little time yet. You staying through New Year's? Yes, sir. Good, good. I'll tell Marie I saw you. Good night. He walked past, giving John a couple of pats on the flank as he went. He and Chloe walked on in silence for a few seconds. Then, how would you feel about Peter changing? She asked. Surprisingly bad. Why? All of them changed together? Wouldn't that be some kind of grand brotherly alliance? There were losses here, though, somewhere. Well, I wouldn't want him to be driven to it. I'd want him to do it because it would make him really happy, not just less sad. Chloe gave him a sharp glance. He caught it, but pretended not to, and stared forward. But even beyond that, he fumbled into silence. Well, I've been thinking about it a lot. Not only about Peter, but about Val, too. You heard him ask if he could change, and that wasn't the first time. The prospect makes me feel bad, hollowed out. I didn't feel that way when Jeff said he would enlist, nor when he changed, nor when you did. So I chewed it over, and I think it's this. You put a hell of a lot into a kid, body as well as soul. I've just started with Lucy and Val. Think how much further along Mom and Dad are. All that time, all that food and clothes and bandages and medicine and energy and care and worry, not just about minds and souls, but to give us healthy, normal bodies. It's a wrench to see it get thrown away, a big wrench. Why did you have to stop being human? John struggled with emotions. Chloe had, he realized, put her finger on one thing that bothered him about the idea of Peter changing. Peter was enough younger than himself that his brotherly emotions were a bit paternal, and he had a probably exaggerated feeling that he'd had a part in raising his little brother. Amplify that, and he could see the way, yet another way, his transformation and Jeff's had upset his parents. But he also felt unfairly accused. I didn't throw it away, he protested. He turned toward her and swept his hands from waist to head. This is still the same, and this... This, he swept his hands the other way, gesturing down his equine chest and forelegs, even this is based on my old anatomy. They had stopped walking. Chloe cocked her head and looked him up and down. What do you mean? I was a bit tall and kind of skinny before, right? Well, I'm still tall and skinny compared to the others. My points and tail are the same color as my hair, and like that. Blackholt, our doctor, says that even the genes in the horse tissue are changed only just enough to be horse genes. They're as like my human genes as possible. Ah, like the lieutenant you told me about, who's a blonde man and a Palomino horse? Yes. Well, then make sure you let Dad and Mum know that. Tell him, Dad, I'm good at the gallop now because I'm your son, and you and I are good at track, even if it's horse racing for me now. That kind of thing. You are still good as a runner, aren't you? Second best in class. Carlin is best. In a field of 6, oh well. And I think Bryce might be faster than me when he gets his full growth. And he felt compelled to add, not counting the teachers. A guy in his 40s and another in his 70s? Jack. Hey, I'm only halfway through training. They get us on endurance, and they're training all the time. But a 70-year-old? 75 or something. I guess they have been turned into superheroes. Well, anyway, that's the advice you didn't ask for. Tell Mum and Dad that even your horsey side is still their kid. Talk to them. Email. Okay, you're right, you're right. They resumed walking. But your top half, Chloe remarked, sure isn't the same. Shoulders, chest, arms. I had to stop talking about them when Jeff first came back. I was making Axel feel bad. And it's the same with you. Strong as a horse? That's the idea. She grinned at him and flourished a long list. Good. Then we can do plenty of shopping. Come on, pack brother. And she squared her shoulders again and marched forward. Follow the lead mare. That's what I do. And we'll follow the lead mare and Buckjack further next time.